June 1944, Southern England. Rain hisses on steel drums stacked in rows that look like tombstones. The air smells like diesel and salt. You can hear engines testing in the dark, a low, hungry growl, but the tanks are not moving. They can't. They're waiting on fuel. Across the channel, German artillery officers are calm. They look at a map of northern France and smile. Ports are cratered. Tankers can't dock safely under Luftwaffe harassment. Fuel convoys by sea can be sunk. They'll run dry in a week, one of them says, almost amused. Armor without petrol is just metal. In a low prefab hut near the coast, a civilian engineer wipes condensation off his glasses with ink-stained fingers. His name is Arthur Millen, 42 years old. Ministry of Fuel and Power. Not a frontline hero. Not a general. A pipe man. The kind of man nobody remembers in statues. On his table, a blueprint that looks like sabotage. The lines show a pipeline running under the English Channel itself. Not carried on a ship. Not laid on the beach like a hose. Buried under the sea, end to end, from Britain to occupied Europe. A hidden artery to feed an invasion. He's been told point blank it won't work. They've run the numbers. The channel is cold and violent. Salt eats metal. Pressure surges burst weak sections, and the first break spills everything. "One rupture," a superior warned him, "and you've just handed the Germans evidence of the plan." Arthur says nothing. He just taps the wall clock, because here's the part nobody on the German side understands. The invasion isn't the hard part. Keeping it moving is. Outside, cranes are quietly loading enormous drums of coiled pipe onto disguised barges. Each drum weighs like a small tank. Each drum is part of a sentence that ends in Paris. The Germans are laughing. The British infantry aren't. And Arthur Millen, overlooked. Rain-soaked, fuel clerk turned. Saboteur of physics is about to change the math of the war with something you were never supposed to see. What? They didn't know in that moment was that they were already watching the beginning of their own defeat. So how did a stupid idea like pumping gasoline under an ocean even begin? The monster wasn't born in glory. It was born in panic. In spring 1944, Allied planners saw a nightmare nobody puts in posters. You can land men on a beach. You can land tanks on a beach. But you cannot land refinery infrastructure on a beach. Armored divisions burn fuel like fire eats paper. If the armored push in France pauses even 48 hours because they're out of petrol, the Germans counterattack, dig in, and now you're in a long, slow, meat-grinding continental war. That cannot happen. The invasion has to break inland fast. It needs constant forward pressure. Pressure needs fuel. Initial proposals were normal. Capture ports fast, unload tanker ships, truck fuel forward. Problem: ports are mined, wrecked, covered by artillery, and easy to bomb. Every tanker is a fat, visible, explosive target. The Germans knew this. They were counting on it. So someone said the thing you're not supposed to say in a serious meeting: what if we just pipe it in? At first, the room laughed. It sounds childish, like watering a garden, like just run a hose across the channel. But a few of the right people didn't laugh. They leaned forward. The idea mutated instantly into something harder. Not a floating hose ships could cut. A real pipeline. Code name: PLUTO. Pipeline under the ocean. Here's how it was supposed to work. In simple terms, manufacture specialized pipe. Some of it flexible and armored like an undersea cable. Some of it rigid steel sections with insane wall thickness to survive pressure and abuse. Spool miles of it onto massive drums called conons, short for conundrum, dark humor from the shop floor. Tow those drums behind tugs, unreel the pipe across the seabed. Hook it to pumping stations disguised as harmless coastal buildings. On the French side, connect to fuel depots and truck it forward to the armor. Instant undersea artery. On paper, that artery had problems big enough to kill a general's career. The channel floor isn't kind. The tides twist and saw. Any weak weld turns into a blowout. And even if you lay it, you still have to push fuel at high pressure across tens of miles. Without bursting the line, internal memos were brutal. Catastrophic rupture risk under surge. Steel fatigue unacceptable beyond 70 bar. Channel deployment will be visible to reconnaissance aircraft. Compromise of entire operation likely. Translation: you're insane. Stop. Then came the first trials. Early test length split under pressure. A section kinked in a bend and tore itself open. One pump house overheated and seized. A junior officer watching from the pier muttered, "This is not a system. This is suicide." The headline inside the ministry might as well have been, "This will collapse under its own weight." But buried in those failures was a pattern, a way to make the pipe act less like pipe and more like backbone. Nobody knew it yet. But that so-called failure carried the seed of victory, because the question wasn't, can we build one pipe? The real question was, can we build enough arteries that even if one bleeds out, the body keeps moving? Then came reality. After D-Day, the clock wasn't ticking. It was screaming. Armored units were ashore. The beachhead was holding. But fuel was burning faster than forecasts. Tank transporters, supply trucks, recovery vehicles, generators, every machine drank. And every additional drum of fuel you moved by truck meant another truck you had to land and protect and keep running on. Fuel. It's a spiral. The first PLUTO attempts to lay line were messy. The sea didn't care about spreadsheets. One deployment fouled in shallows and snapped. A pressure spike cracked a welded section just offshore. The spray in the air around the failure smelled sweet and chemical. A destroyer escort offshore reported possible fuel sheen visible, and immediately everyone's hearts stopped. If German reconnaissance aircraft spotted that sheen, they'd know the Allies were trying to feed the invasion from England directly. They'd know to bomb the pumping sites. Command hated risk like that. One after-action summary from naval support didn't sugarcoat it. The line is dangerously unstable under surge pressure and presents a single point of catastrophic exposure to enemy countermeasure. Translation: if this thing dies loudly, we don't just lose fuel. We tell Berlin exactly how we plan to win. At the same time, field commanders were already complaining, "Where is my petrol?" Battalion logs show tanks rationed below optimal levels. Some units were literally cannibalizing other vehicles just to keep spearheads moving. What the Germans predicted, "they'll run dry and freeze in place," was almost happening. The mood shifted ugly. There were whispers that PLUTO would be quietly scrapped. Go back to tankers. Go back to captured ports. Go back to the slow way. And it almost did die. On paper, killing it made sense. Too fragile. Too exposed. Too weird. And then quietly, something changed. Because the engineers stopped thinking like peacetime pipeline designers and started thinking like wartime saboteurs of physics. Here's the turn, and it doesn't look cinematic. It looks boring. That's why it worked. Instead of betting everything on one perfect, heroic super pipeline, they split the problem. Multiple lines, shorter runs, redundant feeds, parallel pumping. Think of it like veins instead of an aorta. Arthur Millen and the PLUTO team refined two main approaches: KIS cable, a flexible lead-sheathed line, reinforced, wound onto giant floating drums. You could lay it like undersea telecom cable. Slower flow, easier to deploy stealthily. Hamel pipe, rigid, thick-walled steel pipe sections welded into continuous lengths, then spooled onto those Konun drums. Higher pressure, higher throughput, brutal to bend, but it could shove fuel across serious distance. They learned pressure discipline like religion. No big spikes. Stagger pump timing. Keep flow constant so the pipe never jerks awake and tears itself. They tuned valves by ear. They logged vibration like medics log pulse. They built pumping stations that looked like seaside cottages, bungalows, ice cream shops, camouflage with fuel hearts. Human rhythm became the real weapon. Crews rehearsed laying line at night, in rough water, under blackout, blending it with regular coastal traffic so it looked like just another tug. Civilian tanker barges were painted and flagged to look boring. The sea floor became their highway and their hiding place, and then it just worked. Fuel started moving under the channel directly into forward dumps in France. Not theoretically, not one day, right then, in volume. That flow meant trucks in France could refill from inland depots that were secretly being topped up from England. That meant armored thrusts didn't have to wait for port clearance. That meant German artillery plans built around "they'll stall here" were suddenly wrong. It stopped being equipment. It became tempo, reach, pressure, and once it worked once, they did it again and again. Faster every time, more lines, More redundancy, more pressure without bursting. Quietly, the invasion stopped being a toehold and became a machine that cannot be starved fast enough to kill. Night, rain, pumps humming behind blackout curtains, generators throbbing like hearts. Tank columns on French roads drinking fuel that literally crossed an ocean floor hours earlier. German staff work turns from confident to nervous. Reports come in, armored movement deeper than expected. Allied mechanized elements advancing beyond the fuel wall line that German planners assumed was physically impossible so soon after the landings. A logistics officer writes in disbelief that the Allies appear to possess immediate inland fuel reserves inconsistent with known port capacity. Translation: they shouldn't be able to do this. They're doing it, numbers matter here. Thousands of tons of fuel delivered through PLUTO by the end of summer. Flow rates hitting hundreds of tons per day through multiple active lines as the system stabilizes. Every ton is range. Every ton is pressure. Every ton is one more town rolled before a counterattack can form. And it's not just numbers, it's psychology. German units that expected to face exhausted, stalled armor instead faced armor that never seemed to run out of breath. French civilians who expected another trench war instead watched Allied columns push and push and push, without that dead pause every invasion has after day one. Momentum is morale. Morale is recruitment. Recruitment is resistance. Meanwhile, the pipelines stay invisible. You can't bomb what you can't see. You can shell a port. You cannot shell a fuel flow that lives under salt water and looks like calm channel waves. By then, the enemy isn't asking if they cross. They're asking, how fast will it hit us next? And high command on both sides finally understands this isn't a beachhead anymore. This is sustained invasion logistics at industrial scale. Now the question becomes, what rules of war just got rewritten? This is where PLUTO stops being a trick and becomes doctrine. Rule 1. Don't move fuel by truck if you can move it by physics. Every truck you don't land is one less vehicle to feed, guard, and repair. Every road you don't clog is one more lane for armor. Rule 2. Ports are obvious. Undersea lines are not. If the enemy aims at your expected supply route, feed the army from somewhere he can't hit. Rule 3. Redundancy beats perfection. Don't build one beautiful, invincible pipeline. Build 5 ugly, temperamental ones that overlap. Break one, the others carry the load. Now kill the myths. Myth: an amphibious invasion always stalls inland for lack of fuel. Truth: only if you let fuel behave like cargo. If you turn fuel into pressure, literally pressurized flow, you erase the stall. Myth: pipeline engineering is peacetime work. Truth: wartime pipeline work is combat. The pump houses were as critical as artillery. The technicians were artillerymen. They just fired petrol instead of shells. Myth: logistics is boring. Truth: logistics is the hand that squeezes the enemy's throat without ever firing a shot. You also start to hear 2 voices, enemy voice, tense, frustrated. Their armored advance is outpacing estimates. They are resupplied faster than we can interdict. That sentence reads polite. It means panic. Allied voice, flat, exhausted, honest. We weren't brave. We were on schedule. That's from one of the operations men who kept the pumps balanced. No drama, just timing. That's the difference. Hero culture loves the man charging under fire. Industrial war loves the man who made sure the fuel to launch that charge was already waiting. But victory has a cost. Some names get remembered and some names get erased. It's time to go back to the rain and ask whose name vanished. We go back to June 1944, back to the Channel wind, back to the German officer laughing at British desperation. They'll run dry in a week. He's not laughing now. He's watching reports come in that make no physical sense. He's seeing armor farther inland than fuel math should allow. He's seeing counterattack windows slam shut before they open. He's writing warnings his superiors don't believe. The enemy is moving like a force that is drinking from somewhere we cannot cut. He realizes too late that he wasn't looking at desperation that night. He was looking at an artery being stapled to the bottom of the sea. And Arthur Millen? The quiet pipe man? He doesn't get a medal on a balcony. He doesn't get paraded through Paris. He doesn't even get his name in the official line of decisive factors for public consumption. He gets told not to talk. PLUTO stays classified. Pump houses that look like seaside cottages are stripped and repainted as if they were never anything else. The Conan drums are broken up. Reports go into restricted files. For decades, people will say D-Day succeeded because of courage on the beaches, and they're not wrong. They just won't mention the pipeline under the ocean that kept that courage from stalling out on day 3. And that silence has weight, because this is the truth. An invasion is not won by the first man off the landing craft. It's won by the fact that the 50th tank still has fuel 2 weeks later. Listen to the echo. They laughed when they first saw it. They stopped laughing when they realized the sound they heard wasn't just metal. It was their timeline collapsing. That sound wasn't gunfire. It was pumps. It was valves. It was pressure in steel throats under cold salt water at 2 a.m. It was physics turned into strategy. In the end, the thunder that changed the war did not come from a grand speech or a heroic charge. It came from hidden stations disguised as beach shops, from anonymous engineers balancing flow rates instead of aiming rifles, from hands that smelled like fuel instead of cordite. The thunder spoke, not from glory speeches, not from medals, but from quiet hands doing the impossible again and again. After that, the old world never truly belonged to them again.